Day 17. Creating Reusable YAML Build and Deployment Pipelines in Azure DevOps with YAML Templates by Jesper Mayntzhusen. This article will show you how you can create a set of YAML pipeline templates that you can reuse for several projects. It is a continuation of setting up YAML-based build and deployment pipelines in Azure DevOps, making our build YAML pipeline smarter and reusable. Note, this article is starting where setting up YAML-based build and deployment pipelines in Azure DevOps left off. To begin with, we have the following build YAML file. Assuming other projects are based on a similar pipeline, here are the values that are specific to this one: the solution path in the NuGet restore task, the solution path in the VS build task. I will assume the front-end path and dist folder would be the same in other projects, but if not, the following steps could be added for them too. We can introduce a variable to handle the solution path and reference it in the tasks. Note, referencing variables is done like this: $ open brackets var name close brackets. Another thing that may change between sites could be the node version. Right now we run node version 12, but older setups may be different. They could also be set up differently and require different npm commands. For now we can handle the node version problem by assuming that there is a .nvmrc file that specifies the version in each solution. We can do that by using a task that reads a file and saves its content as a pipeline variable. At this point, we could include this build YAML file in a boilerplate solution and could get all the setup quite quickly for new sites just by changing the variable values, making our deploy YAML pipeline smarter and reusable. Let's run through the deploy.yaml file as well. This is the starting point. In the deploy file, there are quite a lot more variables we need to introduce: deployment environment name, IIS website name, IIS website domain, IIS website path. Let's add them as variables. At this point, we could include this deploy YAML file in a boilerplate solution and could get it all set up quite quickly for new versions. However, let's say you had 20 projects and suddenly you decide to add a caching command for node modules because it takes a long time to run npm install each time. This way you would have to run through all 20 repos to add that task, not the smartest way of working. Using YAML templates. You may at this point think, what if I need to deploy my site to several environments? Well, with the setup as we have it now, you could add the other environments in Azure DevOps and then add a new deploy stage to the deploy file. So that means we need a new stage per environment, along with new variables for the environment and potentially things like the domain and IIS website name as well. Instead of doing that, we can use YAML templates to split parts of our build or deploy files into their own template YAML file. We can even store these YAML files in a separate repository and then just pull them in to use them. So on a separate repo you can add your files. I will add a template build file. So you may notice here that it is all the build steps from our build YAML file, except the variable has been replaced with a parameter, and it is called slightly different. $solution path becomes $curly braces parameters solution path. With this change, we can now call the template in our build YAML file instead. To do that, we need to first set up a GitHub service connection in Azure DevOps. So go to your project and click Project Settings in the bottom left corner. Navigate to the Service Connections menu, click to add a new service connection. Here you need to choose GitHub and fill out the fields. Make sure to copy the service connection name, we will need that in a moment. Now let's edit our build YAML file to use our new template instead. So as you can see, we added a new resource section where we get the YAML template repository. Then in the stage we can replace all the tasks with just a template where we can pass the needed parameters in. You may note that for the repo it has a ref parameter, so we could even version our templates with release tags or something similar. We could also have different build deploy files from many different types of sites or v7, 8, 9. Just split them in folders and call the correct path when you call your template. Let's do the same for the deploy file. And we will call it from our deploy.yaml file. As you can see, we have removed the variables as now they are no longer reused. Instead, for each deployment environment, we can simply pass in the environment name and the template parameters specific to that environment. Controlling conditions and environment access. One final thing to note is that you can get conditions on stages and tasks. So if you set up the build to track on a dev and main branch, you may not want it to deploy to the live environment, but only to the dev one if the triggered branch is dev. You can do that by adding a single condition on the live stage. This will make sure the stage only runs if the previous stage succeeds and if the build pipeline was triggered from the main branch. I hope this article has been helpful. Feel free to write me on Twitter at Jesper Mayntzhusen with any comments, questions, or feedback.